Pete, it's great to be with you. Really appreciate the opportunity to chat. One of the things we've been talking about is how to unlock the real value of the customer relationship. I think anytime a seller looks at a book of business, there's some things that might jump off the page. Some obvious opportunities that exist in press releases or in the news, or a new executive is named or whatever the case may be. But I think the real value of the customer relationship is realized over time as we look to meet them where they truly are, uncover needs, and then putting their needs in a very prominent position. I know you've got some thoughts on this, and I'd love to hear your vantage point.
Well, I'm looking at it over a 40-year career, and I will say this, we know that when we're prospecting, we want to separate ourselves from the competition. We want to add value. We want to have a perspective that that helps the dealer to be more profitable, to make more money, and to be better at what they do. And them knowing us is one of the intangibles that they eventually buy our product or our service for. The most important part of that, though, is what got you to the dance will keep you at the dance. And if you ever forget that, you will be reminded because you will lose an account. You have to continuously bring value. You have to continuously evolve. You have to have relationships so deep within your industry that you have information for your current dealers and for your prospects before anybody else can bring it to them. You bring it to them first, and you bring it to them maybe with some additional insights. You gave a great example. I love what you said, current events, but go further. Don't just stay with, well, here's an article, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, here's an article. Hey, do you want to know the rest of the story? Because I have the rest of the story. Come here. I have the rest of the story. That's what you want to bring to your customer. And it's the most important thing in the world to constantly bring value. And it's not easy. It's something that you have to work at. And, one of the things that I'm finding out on my show, the Pete Primeau show, my dealers are listening, and they're saying, I didn't know you knew that. And one of the things that sometimes we do is we take our customer for where we perceive them to be, and then we kind of filter everything around that. But sometimes our perception of where the dealer isn't where the dealer is. For instance, I've got dealers that watch my show faithfully, and they didn't know that I knew all this stuff. Shame on me, right? Because I didn't know they were hungry for this. I thought they were set and they didn't want this. And so I didn't give it to them. So shame on me. It's a good thing I'm doing the show, that they have access to it and they can see all the different things. It's opened up some great conversations. So looking for different ways to add value and truly caring in your heart. I'm just started reading this, and Vincent is amazing to me. The fact that Vincent cares about his customers deeply really resonates with me. And I would say this: if you're at a place in your sales career where you're at an impasse and you're not exactly where you want to be, before you look at your processes, look at your heart first, and then go to your processes, and then ask yourself, do I have the right dealer profile? Do I have the right outreach? All of that, but look at your heart first. That's what I would say.
Sorry. Brilliantly said. No, that was brilliantly said, Pete. Lots to unpack there. I love, first off, thanks for shouting out the book. It's obviously something that's near and dear to my heart. We live in such an instant gratification society, and I've worked with so many sellers over the years, and I think a lot of times they look at what's that immediate shiny object that I can gravitate toward? Where am I going to get the big hit, the big deal that's going to get my boss off my back, or whatever it is? I think the key element that you hit on is you've got to continue to be the person that you pledged to be to the customer while you were prospecting. And that's where I think a lot of times we get away from that. It's a very similar analogy to often what I tell myself and my team about being the person that we pledged to be on interview day, right? You were the best version of yourself to get the job you're in. Well, you're also going to be the best version of yourself to get your spouse. You're going to be the best version of yourself to get your customer. And you've got to continue to be that person. You can't just woo them, win them, get that conversation with a lot of smoke and mirrors and expect to maintain that relationship over time. Stay at the pulse of what matters to the client. And there's a litany of ways that you can do that. You hit on some of them. Obviously you can track press releases. I set up email alerts. I found a lot of different tools that will show me, buyer signals and things of that stature. There's a lot of those out there. You can research them. Your CRM might plug in some of those types of buying signals as well. The other thing you said that really resonated and hit home was take it one step further. A lot of sellers can do some of the things that we've outlined, but great sellers take it another step further. Rather than just saying, hey, here's an article, offer to intro them to the thought leaders that you know. I don't ever need to be the smartest guy in the room, which is a good thing because I rarely am. But the key element is what I do know how to do is I can create relationships and then I can introduce them to the thought leaders that I know and that I've met over time. I want to find the best. I want to find the expert because sometimes that's the value that I can bring is I can introduce my customer to this smart person and they can do magical things together. My part was to put them together. I was the catalyst. Lastly, you're going to make mistakes. Your process is going to evolve. Don't be afraid to make moves because you think you're going to make mistakes. I've done a lot of things over my career that didn't necessarily go where I wanted them to, but I learned from them and I was able to evolve my process accordingly. Invest in relationships, double down on people and process. And like you said, get the people part first. Your process has to revolve around the people that are central to that, whether it's customers or your colleagues or your partners, your vendors. Then it's all about what does that foundation look like? When you've got your foundation set, then you're ready to play the game.
Wow. Double down on people. I love that, Carson. I love that so much. I don't have words for it. I just have a couple of things to add to what you said. And it was all great, and I resonate with it 100%. One of the most overlooked resources that you have available to you, and you don't know it, are competitors. Whenever possible, make competitors your friends. Give you an example. Many years ago, setting up large national show. Well, it happened twice. Setting up large national show, huge dealer. We're competitors. I got my showroom set up and I helped the next guy set up. He's my competitor. I helped schlep in mattresses, put together bed frames. And guess what? One of those times, Carson, the older guy that I helped when I was in my 40s and he was in his 60s or 70s, became my boss 2 weeks later. And do you want to know something? He loved me from the get-go, and we still love each other to this day. You don't know where the ball is going to bounce. You probably don't have ESP. So if you do, you have a blessing. Be wise and be gracious with it. But I love this making mistakes. We're too afraid in this culture to make a misstep. I see teenagers especially, they're so afraid. And I'm like, go out there, have fun, be yourself, and make mistakes, but learn from them. Yeah. Learn from them. If you, I used to tell everybody when I was managing a store, I would tell my salespeople and anyone else that I hired for the store, basically, we have a rule here. And if you screw up the same way 3 times in a row, you will be fired. So if you want job security with us, you have to find new and creative ways of screwing up. If you find new and creative ways of screwing up, you have a job forever. But if you screw up the same way 3 times in a row, you're gone. I'm sorry. You're not learning. So I'll tell you, business can be so fun and it could be the opposite of fun. It all has to do with how you come at it. And if you come at it with thankfulness, so just not to dive into it, but I guess I am, you know, when I was going to college, I had a job tearing greeting cards in a factory. And it's probably done by a computer now, but we manually did it. And at the end of a shift, you had thousands of paper cuts on your hands, and your hands are bleeding all over the place. It's a miserable job, but it served one purpose. I believe the good Lord put me in that job for one reason, for me to get serious about getting good grades and studying, because I learned exactly what I didn't want. And I always thank the good Lord that he gave me that job, and I learned exactly what I didn't want to do, which, especially when you're young, is very important to find out what you do, because then when you get a job like being a salesperson where you can better people's lives and companies' lives, and you can make a difference, and you're not doing the same thing every day, you understand just how blessed you really are. So everybody should have a crappy job early in their life so that they appreciate the opportunity that we have. I mean, it's a blessing to be able to touch people and not do the same thing every day. Sorry, I went on my soapbox, brother.
No, I love it, Pete. I mean, you hit on a couple of things that are really great topics to touch on. First off, that thankfulness and that gratitude element is so easy. It's sometimes hard in the moment because you don't necessarily realize, like, why am I in this moment type of thing.
Yeah.
But I look back on my career as well, and I'm so thankful for some of those early stumblings. There's a reason why the color of money is on my back wall. So I think a lot of us, when you first come out of the gates in sales or anything in your career, you're all full of the charge, right? You think you can take on the world. You think you know everything. I wouldn't say that growth mindset's at the top of your list of priorities, but over time, if you're lucky, you'll morph into that seasoned veteran who is able to teach, not perfectly, but is able and willing to mentor, but still likes to play the game. And that is where I feel like I've gone in my career. I had some jobs that I could take or leave very early on. Had some experiences where, I shot up like a rocket, but I had zero discipline early on in my career. But to be able to learn over time, like you said, sometimes the hard way, how to build consensus with a team, how to play the game, how to play sometimes the, be more diplomatic and act more presidential, as opposed to just being a crusader. Those types of lessons were very important. And by learning those, whether it was the hard way or whether it was through mentorship relationships, as you outlined as well, it's gotten me to where I am. And to be able to understand, to take off those blinders of looking at some of those shiny objects, to be able to look holistically at, okay, these relationships and how can I connect meaningfully within these other relationships. Now, you said something as well that I thought was super impactful, and it's going to take me off on not really a tangent, but in two separate areas. One, about your competition. First, I've got a lot of friends that work for competitors, and have historically had a lot of friends that work for competitors. And what I think is interesting about what you said is sometimes I will recommend my competitor or introduce my friend to a competitor for a very, driven reason. It's what we've kind of outlined through the synopsis of this conversation, because they were the right resource, or right, because they were who my customer had chosen. And so I made that warm introduction. Because here's the thing, at the end of the day, I don't exist to, coerce or strong arm somebody into doing what I want them to do. It isn't about that. It's about helping to be a conduit or being a trusted advisor who leads them to where they ultimately want to be. And the beauty is those types of things will be reciprocal. Yes, I've given business to competitors before, but guess what? When they weren't the fit, came back to me. And so that's the beauty, is where you can create these symbiotic relationships. I think a lot of times people think, oh, my competition, I can't compete because of this or that. You and I were actually talking earlier, and you made a comment, and I'd love to have you expound upon it. That it's not about necessarily competing with the competition. It's about being the best version of you, being the best evangelist of your brand, truly investing in the relationships, and always finding ways to add value.
I mean, yeah. Unfortunately, Carson, not every salesperson gets to the level that you've gotten to. They don't put themselves first, and they don't learn the lessons. So one of the things that we always have to, as salespeople, as professionals, sales executives, you know, we always have to have our learning cap on. What can I learn from this situation? The very worst situation in the world could be one of the best learning situations. And one of the things that you should always do at the end of every failed opportunity, whether it's a failed opportunity with a prospect or a failed opportunity with a salesperson you tried to bring on and it didn't work. And you will find that when you do the autopsy, you will find that there are lessons in there. And once you do a few autopsies and you keep seeing the same thing, if you're a reasonable human being, you're going to come back and you're going to say, okay, I need to change this. One time I lost a sale because it was I'm going to make this up because I don't remember, but a 20-store sleep shop chain. I lost the customer because I didn't understand how they made decisions. And so I went to the owner's store every week for 2 months, and the decision came down and we lost the decision. And I didn't know why. And my boss, Barbara McKay, at that point, she asked the owner, could you give us some advice? She started the autopsy. Where did we go wrong? And I'm like, why is she even asking this? I'm a young, eager beaver salesman, and I've never seen a sales autopsy done before. And he was very gracious, and he said, Pete did a great job. He knew everything about our business inside and out. The one thing that I would say is, at the end of this, we all got together. Every salesperson that ran a store had a vote. And Pete only went to my store. He didn't go to the other stores. And so the other guy outvoted him, outvoted him. So I'm just shaking in my boots, realizing that I completely screwed up and I didn't know. And I am like, I do not even want to get back in the car with Barbara. I'm like, I have visions in my head. She's going to like rip me from one side to the other. She very gently puts her hand on my forearm and she says, Peter, this will never happen to you again. You're smart. You're aggressive. You've learned your lesson. The only thing that you needed to change in this sequence for you to have won this sale was to visit the other stores. And now that you know, I don't need to beat a dead horse. I know that you get it, and I know it'll never happen to you again. And so that goes back to Dale Carnegie, right? Give a dog a good name, right? And give a human being that you work with a good name. Give them credit for learning the lesson. She did a brief summary of it, right? She snuck it in there, but she realized that she didn't need to beat me with it. And it never happened to me again. One of the things that I love whenever I read a sales book is when somebody's pointing out, you have to learn how they make decisions. If you assume that within your industry, all accounts make decisions the same way, you've wrongly assumed. There might be great similarities. There might be more similarities than dissimilarities, but you need to ask the question. There's a lot of different ways to ask the question, but you need to find out what is their process. And I'll never forget this. I almost talked myself out of a sale once. I knew the company's process, and I said, "So Robbie, you got to take this to the board now, right?" He goes, "No, I'm going to make a decision on it right now." I said, "You are?" He goes, "Yes," and it's a yes. And I said, "Thank you. I almost talked myself out of a sale." So here I thought I knew their process because I had asked that question before, because I had been to the table with other products before and lost sales. So now I was smart by half, right? Because I thought I knew the process. It's the same account, it's the same buyer, but it's a year or two later. And on this particular situation, he was able to make that call without going to the board. And I didn't know that going in. So here's the lesson, sales pros out there. Always establish the selling process and how they make decisions, because how your prospect makes a decision can change over time. So
the process is going to change. The people are going to change. And I think that's the key element, is you've always got to make sure you understand the foundation and the core, understand the plays, what are the, how are you going to go to market? And then you said something earlier, Pete, about every day you wake up. I go down my book of business and I ask myself, okay, maybe there's one account, there's 5 projects at that account or whatever it is, and I go through each project. What do I need to do to impact this project today? It could be I shoot a note to a vendor, I send a note to the business decision maker, and just make sure that we're still on their timetable, their timelines that they've established in our mutual rapport. Whatever it is, ask yourself every day, how do I add value? You also said earlier, Pete, if you're not where you want to be in your career, analyze those relationships. What people should you be investing in? Is it customers? Is it business decision maker, influencers? Is it people in your own organization? Is it people out there, maybe you're looking for something else in your career, people hiring for what you might want to do. Always be looking for the relationships that you should be investing in. And sometimes some will surprise you. The other thing you said, I've always called them postmortems. You call them autopsies, but the same concept. So do that. Even if it's uncomfortable, do the postmortem or the autopsy on the negative experiences that maybe you're bringing with you. Did you get fired? Did you lose a massive deal? Did something transpire? Project blew up? Look back on it. Understand those key learnings. You're going to take those things with you. I've had a ton of losses. And I love that Michael Jordan speech, or that meme you see out there. He's missed 9,000 shots. He's missed the game winners, but he's the greatest ever. And it's because he just kept coming back out there. So be able to look back on those failed ops and those postmortems, because you know what they're going to do? They're going to help you see around corners. You're going to be like Neo in the Matrix, where you can dodge the bullets because you know they're coming. You know what's going to happen. I've had plenty of deals that I lost my first year as an account executive. And guess what? I was able to create a perfect year after that, because I knew to make sure that I understood how everybody was buying. Like you said, always figure out who are the key influencers, not just the decision maker, but all of the key influencers. Make sure you understand and control the controllables. Those are the key elements that you've got to focus on. You can only control so much in sales, in life, in your career, but if you control the controllables, you give yourself the best probability at success. And the last thing, be a hero maker. Go out and figure out what looks like a win to everybody you touch. And guess what? If you focus on helping everybody win, your customer, your colleagues, your teams, your partners, your vendors, you're going to win too. And that's what it's all about.
Yep. One of the things that I learned early on is it's called going through the back door. Mike Weinberg talks about it in his books. You know what? You can find out so much before you ever get to the buyer. The warehouse people, they should know you and you should know them. The buyer's not going to tell you what the problems are immediately. There's 100 reasons why a buyer won't tell you. But that warehouse guy that you just bought coffee and bagels for, he'll spill his guts. He'll tell you everything you need to know, right? And he'll tell you who he's having problems with. He'll tell you all kinds of stuff. And the other thing is when you're managing a large account and you need intel from every direction you can possibly get it. You need to have everybody in that organization that you can possibly have contact with. I have gotten tips from secretaries, warehouse managers, retail salespeople that help me win deals, help me not get blown off the floor. I was on the verge of being blown off the floor a couple of times, and I didn't even know it was a problem because nobody was saying anything. Well, guess what? It's your job as a sales pro to find out what the problems are before it gets to your buyer, before it gets to your owner. If you can find it out and you can correct it, all is well. But if it goes undiagnosed, it's going to be a bigger problem. So everybody is valuable. And the more touch points you have at an account that you're managing, the better for you. And the better the relationships are, even better. So
Yeah, if you think about how you can best be an evangelist and an advocate for your customer within your organization, within all of the resources that are at your and their disposal, and you look for ways to make that real and actionable, if you help them see things before they come, and you bring in, those industry experts or, those resources that are going to be valuable to them, you show them behind the curtain, you're transparent with them about your process. Those are the types of things that win relationships. Deals are a result of relationships. That's it. And I think that's where a lot of people may lose sight of that big picture. I think we've done a really good job today of expounding upon some of those key elements. And for everybody checking this out today, definitely be sure to check out the Pete Primeau show. Pete, it's been awesome spending some time with you.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. The margin between winning a deal and losing a deal is so small. And even if you have major competitive advantages, over time, a competitor will arise. And sooner or later, it's going to come down to your knowledge of that account, the relationships that you have at that account that are going to drive the business forward or not drive the business forward. So at the end of the day, that's what ultimately we get paid for. Caring more deeply, going further into the organization, and doing the right thing all the time, even when it costs you money in the short term, because in the long term, it all comes out in the wash. And even if you didn't make more money, you would have great friendships. And that's more important to me than the money. And the funny thing is, those two come together. When you have, a buyer who feels connected to you and really cares about you, if there's ever a tie, it goes to you because you're constantly bringing value.
There's a speech that Al Pacino gives in the movie Any Given Sunday, and it's called his Peace with Inches speech. Yeah. And what it boils down to for me is that all these games, there's a lot of great sports analogies that you can apply to life and career and sales. All these games, they come down to inches. And I think a lot of times people look at, okay, do I need to overhaul my process? You rarely need to overhaul your process. You might need to make a tweak of an inch and make sure that you do something just slightly different. You add this word, that question, and it makes all the difference in the world because it opens up probabilities. It opens up an additional probability that you can do something successful. But, and here's a couple more analogies for you. If you leave it all in the field and you're able to look back in your autopsy or your postmortem and realize that you did everything that you possibly could, even if you lose, it's okay. You can have peace with inches and you can have peace with it because you did everything you could. You controlled the controllables. Then you move on and you take on the next challenge with all of the learnings that you've gotten up to this point. And guess what? You're eventually going to get to a place of stratosphere. You're going to take it to another level because when you control the controllables, you control your odds. And when the odds are with you, you will be successful.
Yep. There's no doubt about it.